All right, good morning, everybody. I think we'll get started. Welcome to session 216. We're going to talk about certification in healthcare, and we're going to learn where there's value. Introduce myself. My name's Andrew Gelbus. You can see from the slide there, I've got a few credentials and some certifications. I've worked as a IT program manager within Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. And I'll give you a little bit more background later on in the presentation. But I want to also have Ken introduce himself.
Good morning. My name is Ken Stensvold. I'm an assistant section head at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. Part of my duties are to oversee the Enterprise Technology Services PMO, Project Management Office, as well as I'm responsible for standing up the business relationship management portion for that same super division, Enterprise Technology Services. Before we get going here too far, we have a couple of slides that HIMSS requires us to do. Andy nor I have any conflict of interest to report. As far as the steps slide, our presentation fits squarely in the satisfaction realm of the steps here. Increasing certifications, increase value to staff, therefore patients, therefore your organization. In the end, we'll show you how we walk through to come to that conclusion. The learning objectives that we have today: recognize if a pursuit of certification has value for myself and my profession. Interpret the research to understand how various healthcare professionals value certification, if they do value it, intrinsically and extrinsically. And we'll get more into that in just a little bit. Evaluate if certification will increase one's salary. Benefit to everybody. Everybody's probably curious about that, and advance their career. And then we also looked at an aspect of assess if the outcomes is any different if the respondents influence hiring in their organization. We felt that that was an important factor for everybody to know. If the person interviewing me has certification, is that to my benefit? The agenda, excuse me, the agenda that we're going to walk through, I'll explain our hypothesis, how we derived at the problem we're trying to solve, our approach to doing that. Andy's going to walk us through the results. And then there were some things that we wanted to do, we didn't get accomplished. So you'll see in the end, we still have our survey out there. It's on our session, upper right-hand corner. We invite everybody to take that. We're going to continue this research. And there are some other things that we're going to continue to look at. And there's some things that we invite you to pursue as well.
Say, Ken, before you go any further, I would like to just poll the audience and ask, for those of you in the audience, if you have some type of certification, would you raise your hand? Okay, excellent. And then raise your hand if you did take our survey. Okay, a few of you. On the session slides, where the slides are, there is a link to the survey. And as Ken mentioned, we are continuing to collect data. And so we'd invite you to take the survey after our talk.
Okay, great. So let's get started. Our hypothesis. Working within the healthcare industry, it is beneficial to have certification. We felt very strongly about that. We have certification, and you'll see in our backgrounds, our certification has actually helped us very much within our career, in our careers. So a little bit of background of myself. Right out of high school, I joined the military. I joined the Air Force. I was a 306 X3. I see a lot of blank looks. That's a telecommunication equipment systems maintenance specialist. That help anybody? I repaired teletypes and computers in the military, and that's where I got my start in computers. I was enlisted. I didn't have a degree. Like I said, I was right out of high school. Had a very successful career, got my promotions along the way. Lived in some interesting places. I lived in England for 3.5 years. I had the advantage of playing softball for the Air Force team, fast pitch softball. I got to travel to a lot of different countries in doing that. So that was a lot of fun. I got to live in Texas. That wasn't so much fun. San Angelo, Texas wasn't that much fun. Hopefully you're not from San Angelo. Okay, good. Yeah. I also visited Offutt Air Force Base for a period of time and spent some time in Knob Noster, Missouri. One thing during my Air Force career that I was a little disappointed in is I was not an officer. I didn't have my bachelor's degree, and therefore I would never hold what I considered an executive leadership position. I could go up the enlisted ranks, and I had quite a bit of responsibility, but the officers were the guys that made all the decisions. So at the 16-year mark of my Air Force career, I decided to transition to the reserves, move back to Minnesota, and pick up my bachelor's degree, which I did in computer science, and then I went to work for Mayo Clinic. Working for Mayo Clinic, I discovered one thing about myself. I was a little bit of a slow learner. In the Air Force, I told you that the officers were the one that made the decisions. Well, in the healthcare industry, we're physician-led. Those are the guys that are in charge of all the committees, although I have a great deal of responsibility, and I accepted that. I was too old to go back to medical school anyway. So I kept pursuing my career, got my bachelor's degree, moved up the ranks to senior analyst programmer, lead analyst programmer, and I discovered that in healthcare, in Mayo Clinic, that it was unlike the military in the aspect of the military twice a year for enlisted folks took time in service, time and grade points, and then you took a test. So the individual with the highest score got the promotion. Well, in healthcare and at Mayo Clinic, you had to differentiate yourself somehow. First of all, there had to be an opportunity. I was trying to become a unit manager. There had to be something there. There first of all, had to be a job. There had to also be something there that was different. And you'll hear from Andy. Andy and I were competing approximately the same time for these unit manager positions. And so there had to be some sort of differentiation. I went and got my MBA. Not a lot of people applying for those positions had the MBA, which did me fine. I became a unit manager. Now all the unit managers got MBAs. So I needed something else to differentiate myself. And that's where certification came in for me. I became Six Sigma. I'm a green belt in Six Sigma. Picked up some other certifications along the way. But the one that really helped me was CP HIMSS. And that CP HIMSS gave me a wide variety of healthcare topics. And that's what got me to my current position, assistant section head there at Mayo. Andy, you want to share some of your background?
Sure. So, unlike Ken, I never thought anything about the military and pursuing that. I went off from, took the traditional, graduated from high school, had an interest in computers, went on, got my bachelor's degree in computer science and marketing, and then went off to a food manufacturing company, Hormel, the makers of Spam and chili and Hormel chili, and did that for 8 years. Was a programmer, did a lot of quality control and sales and order entry, and did that. And then after 8 years, and there was a promotion in terms of analyst programmer and senior analyst programmer, but it was a small IT shop, and I wanted more of a career and more chances of advancement. And so I looked around, and Mayo Clinic had an opening in helping implement their first electronic medical record. And so I thought that would be interesting. I've been getting people sick. Maybe now I can help get them healthy. So went down the road a little bit and started working with them. And similar situation in that, okay, this is interesting. I like doing this. do I want to go down the technical route or more the managerial route? As my programming skills kind of topped off and the fixing of bugs and being on call all the time became a little more of a challenge, I thought I would maybe help lead the teams that support our ORs and ICUs and help roll out the software there. So, but similar, needed really to have some way to distinguish myself. So along with Ken, we got our master's degrees together, and with my brother as well, who was in town. And we had, that was enjoyable, learned a lot, and shortly after did get another unit manager position in Mayo Clinic. So it was fun, but again, continuing to try to learn. I like challenges and stuff, and I got some of those at work, but wanted to learn through schooling too. So went and pursued ITIL certification, the IT Infrastructure Library, because we were implementing a lot more processes and standard service management. So did that, helped implement an ERP system, Lawson, for our supply chain, finance, and HR. And then CP HIMSS came along, and that too seemed to make sense to have a broad understanding of the healthcare field, areas that I hadn't touched on too much, even though I'd been at the clinic for about 10 years at the time. And then also pursued a project management certification because nursing wanted me to help them manage their portfolio. So the idea of certifications and value and being able to differentiate just continued to be important and continued to serve me well.
All right. So the approach we took for our research, the first thing we did was we sat down with key influential people within Mayo Clinic. We sat down with our CIO, our CMIO, other influential physicians, and we interviewed them on their perceived value of certification. We then went out and did a literature search. We had the advantage of using the EBSCO system, which is wide and varied. We went back 10 years. We discovered there wasn't a lot of literature out there, and most of the literature there was out there was focused on nursing.
And we were looking, has anybody looked at certification and the value? Has anybody studied it? Have they done anything to really kind of prove or disprove whether or not certification is worth pursuing? The other thing we did was we've been active in the HIMSS organization, having served on the chapters and stuff, so we had a network of people at other organizations, so we made some phone calls too to see if they had heard of that topic, had done any research on it.
Absolutely, yeah. Good point, Andy. During our research, our literature research, we discovered a company, Competency and Credentialing Institute. They had a tool called PVCT, Perceived Value of Certification Tool. We eventually partnered up with them to do our survey, and so they helped us immensely. And they're kind of focused on nursing, and they're probably one of the reasons that there's a lot of nursing research out there and a little less in other areas. When we started this, we looked at a wide variety of industries. We quickly narrowed down to healthcare, and then within the healthcare, we moved down to IT, nursing, and pharmacy. We looked at some others. We looked at human resources, some other aspects of healthcare. But in order to get the survey and our research done, we narrowed it down to these three industries.
Disciplines.
Disciplines. I'm sorry. Thanks. And so then, after narrowing it down, then we conducted our survey. As I said, we used the PVCT tool. They're out of Denver, Colorado. It was used and proven tool, so it was easy for us to add on to their 18 questions. They had, their 18 questions involved intrinsic value versus extrinsic value. Intrinsic value is personally rewarding. What does it mean to me? People perceive that I know what I'm talking about. Versus extrinsic value of, it got me a promotion. I'm making more money now because I have a certification. We added some demographic questions to that. How long have you been with your company? Are you full-time? Are you a hiring manager? Do you influence hiring? Length of employment, things like that. And then we also added, and Andy, during our results, will go through the 5 questions that we added as well for our specific research. Andy, you want to walk us through the results?
Sure. I want to start out by seeing if there's any pharmacists in the audience. If there are, would you stand up just for a quick second here? Any pharmacists? All right, great. Thank you. You can sit down. The rest of you, stand up for just a second. It's just to kind of get your blood pumping. Make sure you don't fall asleep during the rest. Okay, you can sit down. Thank you.
Is that because you're talking now?
Yeah, right, right. Thanks. All right. Well, let's before we dig into the specific pharmacy results, I want to just talk overall. So, as Ken mentioned, we were looking at, who do we survey? Where do we go with this? We started out with Mayo Clinic and all our sites in the multiple states. We've got 60,000 employees, and we focused within IT, which includes security, nursing, and pharmacy. We were able to send out the survey to them. And then we also had worked with Ray Gensinger, as a CIO over at Sisters Health, because he used to be the Minnesota chapter president, and we continued to stay in touch with him. And he also was able to distribute the survey for us. So we ended up with 2,524 respondents to our survey in that initial results. And that's all we were going to do. We thought that was quite a bit, trying to access other organizations, have them send out the survey on our behalf, and do it in a way that really says they want the results. We had a number of conversations and thought, okay, we got to get this moving, so let's just focus on these 2 initial organizations. But then as time went on, after the abstract got accepted, we started thinking about, wouldn't it be cool if we could do just a little more, and how could we maybe even tap the HIMSS audience? So after or right around the time that the initial cost of the registration was about to go down, the early bird, we asked if we could maybe get the people who had already registered, and before the end of the year, get the survey out. So they'd have a couple weeks to do it. And so we were able to do that. It didn't get all the participants, obviously, because a lot of people register at other times, but we were able to get 204 responses that fall under the IT security pharmacy. And again, if you think of the HIMSS audience being a lot more diverse, different organizations, different geographies, we thought that would still be beneficial. So as I go through the results, you'll see 2 categories, our initial audience and then the HIMSS participants. And as I mentioned earlier, the survey is now out there for us to take additional data points for another summary. So for the pharmacists, back to the pharmacists, our initial results, this is the way this plays out. You remember intrinsic, from within, what do I feel about certification? Extrinsic, how others perceive me, does it have an effect extrinsically? So in our initial results, our survey, we had 75% agree or strongly agree there's value intrinsically in certification. We had 58% extrinsically find that they agree or strongly agree in the value of certification. And then in terms of disagreement, intrinsically 16%, intrinsically 32%, extrinsically, and then a few that didn't have an opinion either way. And then with the HIMSS results, you can see there were only 4 pharmacists that participated by the end of last year, and 94% strongly agree or agree, and 75% extrinsically strongly agree or agree, and very few disagree in those 4. In terms of the additional questions that we added, does it get you the job? Does having a certification after you get it get you a job? We found in our initial results with pharmacy, 55 or a little over half strongly agree or agree that's important to have the certification. And in terms of the HIMSS audience, all 4 felt strongly about that. We wanted to know if the employer pays for the certification, whether that played any value in it, any part in it, and about 1/3 in those initial results, and all of them in the HIMSS results. And then does it increase value to the organization? The majority strongly agree in both HIMSS and in our initial audience. We also asked, does it increase your salary after you're certified? You'll see that in the case of our initial audience that we've used, it doesn't. There's more disagreement, strongly disagree that it doesn't impact your salary. And there's maybe some indication that it gets you promoted, but not a lot. So if you go back to the previous PVCT scores of intrinsic and extrinsic for pharmacy, the majority of people are doing it more because they feel it has value, not that you can necessarily point to salary or promotion. On the HIMSS audience, the 4 pharmacists that did, there's more of an indication that it would increase your salary or get you promoted. The top certifications that were listed as it relates to pharmacy, the medication therapy management certification, the board certifications, and then advanced cardiac life support or basic life support were the ones that were listed in our initial audience. And then you'll see in the HIMSS audience of those 4, CP-HIMSS and health informatics are also listed. And you can also see for somebody that, because we let people list up to 5 certifications that they have, but we did a count to say, did they have at least 1 certification? So about 59% in our initial audience, or 43, had a certification, at least 1, and in the HIMSS respondents, half of them, two of them did. So just to give you an idea of which particular certifications they were listing. And we didn't give much guidance as to what a certification is, whatever they consider it to be. So you'll see in some of our other results different types of certifications or things that at least the respondents felt were considered a certification. So the results for pharmacy, the other thing we wanted to just, as Ken mentioned earlier, we want to understand whether there's any bias or any particular just understanding. If you had a certification, how much did you value it versus, I mean, if you didn't have it, and it was significant that people that had a certification did place more value on getting or maintaining a certification than those that didn't. Not substantial, but it was noticeable in terms of the participants that responded to the survey. And then we also said, do you influence hiring? Either you're a supervisor or maybe you're on interview panels or something. For those people that responded to the survey, how did they value certifications? And they placed a little less value than people who didn't have a hiring influence, for whatever that's worth. We just wanted to understand that. Okay, now I want to poll audience here again and ask anybody in nursing, would you please stand up? Okay, a few more nurses. And stay standing if you have a certification. Okay, seems like the majority of you. Thank you. So for nursing, we had 1,897 in our initial audience that responded to the survey, so really great response from nurses. And you'll see intrinsically they place a lot of value on certification. They agree or strongly agreed, 83%. Only 13% disagreed or strongly disagreed. And the intrinsic side, again, from themselves. And then extrinsically, a little more than half felt there's value in certification, and about 1/3 disagreed from an extrinsic standpoint. For HIMSS results, of those 204, we had 35 nurses respond to the survey, and 91% agreed or strongly agreed in the value of certification, intrinsically that is, and 70% felt extrinsically there was value. So you can see a little more, obviously different counts and population there, but more emphasis from the HIMSS audience in nursing on the value, but both clearly see value in certification. Then as it relates to our additional questions, does it get you the job? A little more than half in our initial results, almost 3/4 in the HIMSS results felt that you got you the job. They agreed it did or strongly agreed it did. And then in terms of whether their employer pays for certification, in the initial results, we have almost 2/3 agreed that the employer paid for it, and in the HIMSS, about half paid for the certification. Then, does it increase value to the organization? The majority, 83%, felt that it definitely increases value to the organization, and same with HIMSS, even more so, that having certification increases value to the organization. Then those other two questions, the buck stops there. Does it increase your salary? Less than half in our initial audience and about half in the HIMSS audience felt that once you get the certification, that it does impact your salary. About the same amount in our initial audience felt that it does get you promoted, and a little more than half of the HIMSS respondents felt that having certification lets you advance or get a promotion. So from a nursing perspective, that's how those 5 additional questions as well as the PVCT tool laid out. So in terms of which certifications were listed for our initial audience, and again, we just said, do you have a certification? If you have multiple, list up to 5. And of those 1,897 nurses, 1,100 or 58% had at least one certification, so more than half. And the ones they listed, the critical care nursing, those life support certifications, nursing informatics, and then at Mayo Clinic, I'm not sure at Sisters Health, but at Mayo Clinic we have a quality program, and you can get bronze certification, gold certification, silver. There's other types of certification that are unique to our organization, and so many of them listed those in that initial audience. And then as it relates to the HIMSS audience, 86%, the majority of the people who responded in nursing, listed certifications. The common ones listed were CP HIMSS or CA HIMSS, nursing informatics, the critical care, and then the project management certification. So those were the ones that were frequently listed in those results. And so the conclusion for nursing was that, like with pharmacy, those that had a certification also placed more value on getting or maintaining a certification than those who didn't have a certification, even though it was the majority. And then, again, for that bias or just wanting to know, for people who influence hiring or are supervisors, in the case of nursing, a little different in that the people who are in those positions, they actually valued certification even more. So if I were a nurse, I would definitely boast my certifications. I would continue to do that because the supervisors and people who might interview me or consider me for advancement see even more value than those that aren't in that kind of position. So very positive from a nursing perspective. So now I'm going to shift to IT, and I'm going to ask those of you who are in a technology or security role to stand up for a second, if you would.
Quite a few.
All right, yeah, about the same number of nurses. And stay standing if you've got some type of certification. Okay, almost as many. Thank you. So for our results, this is the way it ended up breaking down as far as the PVCT scores and those questions that deal with intrinsic and extrinsic. More than half felt there was intrinsically there was value, so I value it myself. I agree or strongly agree Out of the 554 IT and security folks in our initial audience, 68% felt there's definitely value. 22% did not feel there was value. They disagreed or strongly disagreed. And again, that's intrinsically. For the HIMSS audience, we had 165 that responded, that IT or security in the background. Similarly, but even more so, felt that there was value, 81% agreeing or strongly agreeing in the value of certification intrinsically. And you'll see extrinsically less, 55% for our initial audience, 68% for the HIMSS audience. Still definitely see value, more than half, but not quite as much as intrinsically from within. And then a little more disagreement for the extrinsic. So that's how in terms of the value of certification, how that laid out for IT. For the additional questions that we asked, for our initial audience that we polled and asked them, does it get you the job? A little more than half felt that having a certification would get you a job after you're certified or allow you to advance. Does the employer pay for the certification? A little more than half as well. And does it increase value to the organization? Almost 3/4 felt in IT or security that it increases your value. For the HIMSS audience, pretty much the same. A little more felt that it got you the job. A little bit more did cite that the employer that they're with pays for the certification, and more felt that it increases your value to the organization. And again, I just think of the HIMSS audience being much broader, more diverse, so a nice kind of barometer to kind of see from our initial results in the Mayo and Sisters Hospital versus the HIMSS results. In terms of once you have the certification, does it increase your salary? Not so much. For our initial results, about a third felt it did, but more than half felt it did not. Does it get you promoted at least? A little more than a third felt it did not. About half felt it might influence you getting a promotion. For the HIMSS audience, a little different. Half feeling that it increases your salary, a little less than half feeling that it doesn't, and in terms of getting a promotion, about half and a little less than half that it would get you promoted if you had some certification. What were the top certifications that people listed if they had an IT or security background? In our initial audience, those 554, almost half had at least one certification, 272. And in terms of the ones that were listed, up to 5 they could list, project management. These aren't in order of how frequent they were listed, but project management, CompTIA, if you're not familiar, is a nonprofit organization that has hundreds of thousands of certifications they help distribute. A+ is the most common one, which tests for hardware and software, general competencies. That one was listed quite a bit under CompTIA. There are others. Java, a number of Microsoft certifications were listed, and CISSP from the security area was a top one listed. For the HIMSS results, the respondents there, 72% had at least one certification. And in terms of the top ones listed there, the CP HIMSS, project management, ITIL, I mentioned I have that one, that was listed. CHCIO is for CIOs in particular, and then again the CompTIA. So a little different diversity in terms of certifications that were listed, but some of the same ones. And then just like with the other disciplines, we wanted to ask for those who have a certification, did they feel there was more value than those who didn't have a certification? And we did see that, yep, they ranked it a little bit higher than those that didn't. And then in terms of people that have a certification, or in terms of those who influence hiring, they're a supervisor or they interview candidates, they place a little less value on certification itself than those who didn't influence hiring. And again, just to look at that particular set of results. So from there, Ken, do you want to kind of bring it home and say what does that tell us overall?
Sure, yeah. So we're going to go through the overall results here. For those people that didn't squarely fit in the IT, the nursing, or the pharmacy category, this kind of gives you an idea, if you weren't in one of those categories, what the overall value of certification was. And as you can see, for the intrinsic, extrinsic, on our initial results was 80%, 61%, 80% was self-motivating. 80% people felt that there was some self-motivation there to do that, and 61% felt that there was an outward influence that helped determine that value. As Andy went through on the individual results, HIMSS results were consistently higher, 83 and 68% on those intrinsic, extrinsic values. Whether it increased your salary or got you promoted, again, on our initial results, it was, that around that 40% mark. And initially, when Andy and I did this, we felt, that's kind of low. We were hoping it'd be a little bit higher. We were hoping that there was maybe a silver bullet in certification. Well, that's not the fact. There's a lot of contributing factors to that. It's pretty good. 40% of the people that got the certification felt that it increased your salary and got you promoted. That's a pretty good odds, if you're approaching that 50-50 mark by getting the certification. HIMSS results were around that 50% mark in increasing salary and getting you promoted. Overall, getting the job, close to 60% of people felt that because they had certification, they got the job that they were in. Employer places for certification. This was one category where HIMSS was less than our initial results. So 68%, HIMSS was 61%. Increases value to the organization. Overwhelming 80%, 86% felt that getting certification was of value to the organization. So what did we learn overall in the entire survey? Nursing places more value on certification than IT, than pharmacy. I think that nursing has a more well-developed certification process, and that probably is a contributing factor to there's more value in nursing on certifications.
I'd say even within the Credentialing Institute, when we were talking with them, that's where most of the research and articles that are out there, the journal articles that have been written on certification are within nursing. So it follows that they would be placing the most value to, at least today.
Yep. Nurses that influence hiring place slightly more value on getting and maintaining a certification. In pharmacy and IT, those people place slightly less value on it. Again, with the influence of nursing heavily towards that certification, that only makes sense.
Well, to me, the takeaway there would be is if you know who's going to be interviewing you and whether they have a certification. If they do, well, then you'd want to emphasize it in your resume, cover letter, make sure it's evident that you consider that valuable because they likely do as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's our third point here. Those who have certification, so it's beneficial to you to research that hiring manager or that place that you're going to apply to. If they have certification, they place slightly more value on getting and maintaining those that don't have the certification. So if you find out that the hiring manager does have certification, you can highlight that on your resume, to Andy's point. And again, HIMSS survey pool was more diverse, more organizations represented. They placed slightly more value on that certification. So what are the things that we could have done that we didn't do, things that we wanted to do we didn't get done?
Or that others could do.
That others could do, absolutely. We wanted to research the hiring managers to see if those people that had certification, were they better performers? That was a key question for us that we didn't have time to do. And I mentioned we were thinking about interviewing human resources. That's one thing we'd like to do within and across the disciplines, interview those hiring managers. Research other disciplines within healthcare. There's a whole lot of them out there. All of your radiology, cardiology,
PT, OT,
yeah,
you name it.
yeah. There's endless places that you can do that research. Like you saw, we narrowed our focus down. And then another question that I'm sure that most of you are going to have or do have is, what is the dollar value of certification? I mean, is it really worth my time and effort to get that certification? Is it a drastic improvement or is it a slight improvement?
Now, I'll tell you, for the Project Management Institute, any of you that are project managers, they do a survey every couple of years, and they just released a study last year, and they were able to say from their survey, of course, they're distributing it, but a little biased maybe, but regardless, they've been consistently putting that out, the Project Management Institute, and they reported a 20% increase in salary for those who have a PMP certification than those that don't. So something like that would be useful if we could, get at that. Again, another follow-up study that could be done.
And along that same category, which of the certifications, we went through, what we didn't do is we didn't predefine what a certification meant. Maybe we could have better defined that, and then we can determine which certifications are most worth pursuing by discipline. So because we're at HIMSS, we did a little bit of calculating here. Of our total respondents, 2,728, 86 people in our survey pool, or 3%, had CP HIMSS or CA HIMSS. And if you were at the John Boehner, Ed Rendell conversation, prior to that you learned that just short of 900 people have CP HIMSS or CA HIMSS, or CP HIMSS, I'm sorry, was CP HIMSS. Yeah. So are there people that took...
Over the last year, okay.
Over the last year,
ones.
I'm sorry. Thanks, Joanne. Were there people that took the CP HIMSS test this time around? Good.
Got one?
Good. All right. So our research results indicate that there is a perceived value to certification. This infers that employers find satisfaction through certification. So that concludes our comments. I would like to thank Jim Stabinsky, the Competency and Credentialing Institute. He's now the CEO. And we have Alex Amsalen up here to help us answer some questions of the technical variety. So I'd like to thank them. They were a huge help. Alex was a huge help to us. Want to remind you to fill out your surveys, the session evaluations, and there is our survey link. You can get a hold of both Andy and I either through LinkedIn, or our email addresses are there as well. So with that, we'd invite Alex to come up and questions.
Thank you for your presentation. My name is Phil Odle. I work for the Department of Veterans Affairs, and I am a registered nurse, nursing informatics specialist. I have two things to say. Basically, a comment to your point about defining what certifications were. As a registered nurse, I do not consider CPR or ACLS to be a certification. I think that is part of the competency for doing the job that you do. It does not require the same level of study that a certification does. But when you were on your surveys, you asked people if the organization paid for their certification. By that, did you define that they also paid for the training and the cost of taking the exam, or just the cost of taking the exam, or did you define that in any way?
We didn't define that. It was a pretty open-ended question. Does your company pay for certification? I can tell you that Mayo Clinic pays for the successful passing of your certification tests up to a certain dollar value. I'm assuming that most companies are in that same category. But that is a point that we could have better defined.
Okay.
And if I can step in on that one, we've done, for the Competency and Credentialing Institute, we do OR nurses. So we looked at their lapsed, how many research cycles they go through, if their employers paid for their initial, if they are paid and then had to be reimbursed, and looked by cycle and found there isn't much of a difference, but I think like when we found it, it was more intrinsic for that. So regardless of being paid for it, it was more standard across the board in that. But
Still found value in,
right,
in
yeah.
doing it?
So even if it came down to the payment of it, we found that people still wanted to recertify regardless of payments.
All right, thank you.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. Appreciate the insights there. A follow-up point to one of the categories or questions that you had listed is what is you say there's value to the organization or people responded to there's value. What are some of the typical things that the organization sees value in? Like if I go to my, let's say, organization and say, hey, I'd like for you to maybe pay for this or give me at least the time to be able to study or things like that. And they say, well, what's in it for me? What are some of the responses to that?
I would just say, I mean, anecdotally, when for the ones that I have taken, like the ITIL one, I had to speak to this. We're going to be implementing a lot more processes within IT. We're going to do change management and use industry processes, and so I had to essentially make a case that I think it was about $300 for the certification, so justify whether or not they would pay for it. And then what I did is later showed the processes that I helped create and how they reflected the industry. So it wasn't something, you know, that we made up. We maybe adapted a little bit for our organization, but that's how, when I think of that question and the answer I'm putting in, I can actually demonstrate that the things I learned in getting the certification I'm applying. So I'm adding value in that regard versus struggling and coming up with things that have already been solved outside of our organization.
Yeah, that's a good answer. So it proves that I'm a lifelong learner, that I value education, that I have gone through a body of knowledge, and I know that knowledge. So I therefore have value to the institution. The other thing is, these certifications that you get, PMP for instance, fellows, which is not really a certification, but it gives you a networking opportunity. And I, as a hiring manager, find that very, very beneficial. I mean, here at HIMSS, I've gone to all these different organizations, talking to different people from all over the country. The problems at Mayo, the problems that I'm trying to solve at Mayo, they're also trying to solve. They have some ideas. I can give some ideas. So it also gives you that networking aspect of it as well. And I think that that's very important.
Because most of these have a professional organization that are meeting regularly or networking. Project Management Institute, there's all kinds of different webinars and other conferences that you go to. And so by having the certification, you're now in that network as well.
Yeah. So I'm CP HIMSS certified as well as Andy. I still need to have 45 additional credits to keep my certification. I have to keep learning.
That's traditionally what people think of, I think, to the previous question, what is a certification? It's usually ones where you had to study, you maybe had to have some experiences, but the key is you have to continue to keep it up to date too, through education and through your work, potentially.
And that touches on what a recertification cycle is. For instance, for our CNOR credential, you have to obtain 125 contact hours throughout a 5-year recertification cycle. And also to speaking for credentialing, that there's a lot of certificate of mastery programs, but there's a higher need for credentialing now. So for us, we turn these certificate of mastery programs into a credential when we see need for one, but it's moving for the standards to want people with credentials and not just a certificate of mastery.
So more of an ongoing.
Yeah. So.
Okay, and then if you don't mind, a second question, a little bit off the side, around what would you think is kind of the best approach for getting the background, getting the education for somebody who is new to healthcare IT, who's made a career kind of switch from other IT, right, as well as then specifically the CPHIMS or CAHIMS certification, which will take a couple of years, right, to even just accumulate the experience to be even to qualify to go to an exam like that. So what are some of the approaches or, ways to best get there?
And I'm, yeah.
I can answer those too. I just presented on that for the Virginia HIMSS chapter. Chapters will also do training events. We did a cross-training program for IT PMs and healthcare practitioners, administrators, where we helped start that. So.
And what session number was that?
That was 172.
172.
So you'll find the slides
get
up
the
there.
slides, contact
And,
info.
our
Yeah.
contact information is there. I'm Rick Verrill. I'm with Enterprise Resource Performance, Inc.
But I can tell you that HIMSS is fantastic on the research material, the study guides that they have, those types of things. People are very, very willing to work with you. If you're looking to get CA or CP HIMSS,
There's a
But it-
plethora of information.
Yeah, and in
Yeah.
any of the organizations, I would say network is your number one way to learn from others. They'll suggest, oh, get in with this organization, talk to that person, this person just did it, they have a study guide, oh, and save you a couple $100, whatever it might be, or there's an online quiz you can take. I mean, there's a lot of resources available, but I get most of those through networking with others.
Yeah, know your learning style. There's free online courses in health informatics and ITPM. There's also the chapter events where you can have instructors as well as the networking opportunities. So my question for you, Andy and Ken, or recommendation, as a potential rationale for pursuing certification, you may want to consider it as a protective mechanism. I'm over 50, that's what I'll admit to. And age discrimination is common, especially since those of us over that age tend to be higher compensated individuals, and you're competing against people who may have some of the credentials but are significantly younger and lower price. So it can be a way to help justify the rationale for bringing you in or keeping you in on a price performance point.
I would agree with that, and I would also say the cost value proposition, certification is so much less expensive than going back to school and spending many years getting an advanced degree. If you've at least got a bachelor's degree, I would say at this point in time you may find more value in certifications as opposed to
Right,
a master's or PhD or something along
As
those
Ken, your
lines.
experience highlighted, you looked around at your peers and they all had masters in business, so you had to go one just to be competitive with your peers. It would be interesting if you stratified by age or position in the career cycle the value of the credentials.
Which we do have that data, so we could do that. That's a
Right.
good point.
And
Yep.
we have pulled data at our company on that to look at recertification cycles, and we find that in someone that's been working and is older, they value their credentials more because the industry standards have been changing. So you see
to keep up.
a younger cohort coming in, and it's required for them, or changing from just an RN degree to a BSN. So-
Right, and that would also help you assess the trade-off between
Right.
years of experience as a discriminator
Right.
versus having the credentials if you're
Yeah.
20, 21,
And when people
22.
call in, they're very adamant, well, I've been certified for 21 years, and this is my credential, as opposed to somebody that's newly
Right.
getting one.
You may also find some value in looking at people who hold cross-industry credentials. So like I'm a fellow with ACHE, so that's board certification as well as holding the PMP and the CP HIMSS. As well as, is there a differentiator among people who hold more than 2 credentials? Okay.
You-
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
So the certifications that were largely mentioned now were like the nursing or pharmacy certifications, what are some of the, like with the rise of wellness in the medical industry with like medical fitness facilities, what are certifications like the American College of Sports Medicine has like exercise physiology certifications, and they even have an exercises medicine credential. Is there some value in some of those certifications?
I would say there is, just because the way we've summarized it, there's value in certification. So for your particular focus area, then even more so if it's specific to that. And actually, when we talk to some of our physician colleagues about certifications and board certifications in the physician community, it's more of it's quite a different thing. At least it felt like it is like. It's an expectation. I mean, if you're going to be a cardiologist, you're going to be board certified in cardiology. I mean, you have to. I mean, it's not a question. So in areas where it may be an option, I think the same thing holds true. If you're going to be in sports medicine field and you're a physical therapist, then if there's a sports medicine physical therapy certification, yeah, you're going to want to do that, and there's value.
Yeah. I guess what I mean to say is, like, let's just say in healthcare IT, for example, there's a lot of people entering them are in, let's say, nursing informatics. So it's not just the healthcare IT certification, but it's the clinical experience. Within healthcare IT, would like an EKG certification or like in exercise physiology, would that be useful clinical background for something like healthcare IT?
I mean, and our study didn't address that, but I would think it is. Whatever area you're going to work with, if you're in IT, pharmacy, nursing, any other field, the more proof you can show that you understand that group that you're going to work with, the more effective you're going to be, the more respect you're going to get from that group, because you just understand it that much more. That would be, the downside of taking somebody who's managed projects in construction and put them in healthcare, and they've got nothing else in their background about healthcare. They may struggle a little more than somebody who's practiced.
Right. And then there's requirements for some credentials that you have to be in a certain area of nursing, for instance, for 2 years with X amount in the OR. And then you have to maintain that through a certain cycle, and for different credentials, they might require like a master's. So you have to show that you have worked in it. So if you're just coming out of school, you still have to show that you've been in that before you can get into the credentials. So it really differentiates different levels of nurses or informatics.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Carol McDonough, and I'm a business development professional working in the healthcare IT space. And I was just curious what type of certification, healthcare IT certification, you thought would provide the most value for business development professionals who are involved in pursuing contracts, responding to RFPs for contracts, specifically government contracts. What certification do you think is most valuable, number one? And secondly, in terms of the years of experience that are required for so many of these certifications, can you qualify if you don't have hands-on healthcare IT experience, if your experience is more related to business development activity?
So like the CP HIMSS and CA HIMSS, you wouldn't have had to have actually practiced in any of the broad areas of healthcare in order to get CA HIMSS or CP HIMSS, and the CA HIMSS doesn't require as much experience than CP HIMSS. So that would be certainly one that would demonstrate an overall understanding of the healthcare and technology field. Project management, dealing with contracts, are still about projects. That would be a possibility along those lines. Yeah. I'm not familiar in terms of supply chain management or contracting if there's unique certifications to that area.
There's a government, there's a core contracting officer, that's government. There's different ones. It depends on your agency. Your agency should have training. Because I work for the VA, and they have a VA acquisition academy that trains contracting officers and the core.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. If anybody...
One more question?
One more? Yep.
Was your study IRB approved?
We did go through IRB process, yes, and it was I can't remember how we didn't need IRB approval. We got we got the, whatever you want to call it, exception that we didn't need approval for it. Yep.
Exception.
Exception, yeah.
Just a last quick question. I am interested in how you tie this back to quality of performance in terms of patient care. I think what would be a very interesting leverage or negotiation part of a conversation is to say, if you have these certifications to me really brings the question of how much accountability there is. And so if you can tie that back to the value of patient quality care, it really, I mean, that's meaningful to me. So.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. In doing this, what we found out is you could literally start a company to do this research.
Just doing certifications, yes. Keep some folks.
Complex and complicated, I know it scares a lot of people because
Yeah.
the excuse of it's complicated, there's a lot of variables, but ultimately, and I don't mean to be hard.
No,
I'm
no.
not doing the game. So ultimately, there's a common language that even people with healthcare understand. It's all about
Yeah.
No.
care, prevention.
Yeah, and for accountability and patient care, that is actually one of the questions that we do ask on it, and an intrinsic factor, so we can measure that, to answer your question on that. So it is being measured against the other extrinsic values as well.
There is research that it's not a certification, but nurses that have a BSN versus a diploma or an AAN have better results. There's nothing to
All right.
Thank you. And
Thanks,
again, we
everybody.
encourage you to take our survey, fill out your
Evaluation. Yep.
evaluation as well.
Thanks.
Thank you.